Hi there, it's Baldwin. I'd like to speak about what really makes true human connections. And I want to put this in a perspective of where we can look at what makes true human connections in real life and how we can apply that to get the same effect when we're dealing with people through technology, which is increasingly the case, right? So it was a bit fuzzy for me for a long time, but I thought about this, did some work on it, and it dawned on me that the kind of relationships that inspire trust are also the ones where the let's say the business or the person initiating that relationship is authentic. I know this sounds very obvious, but what I mean with being authentic is also that they have the courage to put themselves in a more vulnerable position. And so what happens is when you do that is that you inspire even more confidence because having the bravery to expose the challenges and the struggles you're dealing with actually has the opposite effect of what many businesses think, who are kind of always in a role of appearing as flawless and as perfect as possible. But if you show your vulnerability, what you do is you sort of show that you really have nothing to hide or protect, and that inspires confidence in a way. So think about how stories works. For example, the people like to root for, or the main characters in these stories are typically the underdogs. These are characters that are up against a challenge and are not always as powerful as the villains in the story. Now, the villains in the story, those are usually the beautiful, flawless, rich, powerful characters, and they always have a negative connotation. But strangely enough, businesses prefer to play that flawless role rather than embracing the character of an underdog. So when you think about some of the companies that sort of really became extremely successful because of vulnerability, there's a few that come to mind. One of them could, for example, be Apple. The story of Apple in the 80s and the 90s was a story of survival. And that's, I guess, how they also it was able, when Steve Jobs came back to the company, that he got a cult following because people could sign up to his big challenge, right? That's a very good example of that. Another good example was Richard Branson at the same period. So in the 1980s, Richard Branson was effectively growing his empire, but Richard Branson was a challenger. He took on the record labels and he took on the airlines. So what he did was he put himself in an underdog position and got all the support. Now, so why am I rambling on about this? Well, it's extremely important when you connect with people online that you are courageous enough to also show the challenges and the flaws you're facing with, because that's how you can occupy the place of the underdog in people's minds and in people's hearts. If you think about it, for example, true leadership in the past was all about, people like Alexander the Great, riding into battle with his troops, or think about our prophets, the people who have conveyed us very important messages. They took on that role of the underdog. So basically, what makes certain people better at making human connections is that they have the courage to also be vulnerable enough to make sure that connection happens, and it goes beyond just a superficial acquaintance. Another thing about vulnerability is that it is very uncomfortable because it's all about putting yourself out there. It's about taking a risk, right? I mean, you may think that, what this guy's saying is also naive, but in fact, it's actually very brave to do so because you are risking betrayal. You're accepting total accountability for if it doesn't work out. And you're embracing the fact that there's no such thing as a guarantee. So by opening up and being more vulnerable and authentic, you are accepting that risk. And that's why the payoff is so good, because I guess if you really are able to make that special connection and build that relationship, then that relationship can turn into an ongoing business relationship that can bring you a lot of proceeds, right? So anyway, this is just something to think about as we're putting together the pieces of how to become more human online. What's often the truth is that we just have to take things from the offline world and figure out how to apply them in the online world, because in the end, these two worlds aren't really that different. It's it still is all about making human connections. And so this is why we're on this quest on perfectioning the art of making personal connections through simple technology. Thanks very much for watching, and until soon.